Shroud University, this is Russ Brial bringing you another discussion on the Shroud of Turin, the greatest mystery of the known world. We are back with Isabel Piczek and myself, Russ Brial, with Shroud University and our video blog here. And as we said before the break, Isabel Piczek is a world-renowned artist, and we're discussing all things related to the Shroud and why it could or could not be the work of an artist. Because that is the alternative. What we have here, it either is the authentic burial shroud of Jesus or it's not. And if it's not, then what is it? So now there's a theory out there that's been popularized, and this I think gets some genesis from the belief that the Shroud is medieval, which has. I'll acknowledge that it has been that medieval date has been supported with carbon dating. That's a problem, and there are other areas on Shroud University. You need to go to the School of Chemistry and look at the articles there that deal with carbon dating. And this is not a discussion about that, but you need to know that in 2005, Ray Rogers, a chemist, took thread samples from the main body of the Shroud, compared them chemically to thread samples taken from the corner, the one sample cut from the outside corner edge, and determined that they are not the same. Well, how in the world can this happen? How can you have thread samples from the same cloth and not be the same chemically? And so what we believe now is that that corner that was cut for carbon-14 dating was probably an area that was rewoven during the Middle Ages, because that corner was handled hundreds of times. And but you can read about some of that on the School of Chemistry and watch some of the videos that are there. Suffice it to say, now carbon dating has been seriously called into question, and and since they violated the sampling protocol by taking only one sample instead of three, so if they have a bad sample, what are you going to do? How can you prove? So they messed up. And so, having said that, so since there is the general belief out there in the world that the Shroud is medieval, then there have been those authors who have written books saying that the only artist capable to have produced something anywhere close to the Shroud of Turin was Leonardo da Vinci. But there's a problem. And the problem is that he wasn't born when the Shroud was first appeared in France in 1356. In fact, he was born 100 years later, right?
100 years later, yes.
And I don't think that this theory suggests that he invented time travel. So part of this Leonardo theory is that whatever was displayed in Lourdes, France in 1356, that was just a crude idea. And Leonardo captured that idea, and whatever that was disappeared, and then Leonardo decided to do his own shroud, almost as a self-portrait, if you will. So I wanted to have Isabel weigh in and discuss a little bit about Leonardo and his paint styles and techniques, and whether or not it's even conceivable that the shroud could be the work of Leonardo da Vinci.
If I ever have seen anything which is inconceivable, that is the Leonardo da Vinci theory. Somebody who says that doesn't know anything about the man Leonardo or his art. Forget it that he was born 100 years later. That's a good argument, but we can use up much heavier arguments. Leonardo was an extremely hesitant artist, extremely slow. Maybe the slowest artist in the history of art. How his patrons put up with that, I don't know. Mine certainly wouldn't. That I know from experience. But anyhow, that's why he was unable to paint murals, for instance, because to be a mural artist like I am, it takes a fast, very decisive person, because you only have hours to finish a fresco piece. And even if you paint with acrylics or some tempera, it takes a lot of strength and fastness. to finish. He spoiled one mural and wall after the other. The Last Supper within his lifetime started to disintegrate, and he mixed all kinds of techniques, tempera with oil, watercolor, fresco, everything went
So he
on
mixed
top of
all
it.
kinds of elements
Yes,
together.
because he just could not get himself to finish that painting. And now that it
But you're
went
saying that
through
within his lifetime, the Last Supper began to disintegrate.
to disintegrate, yes. Then forget the Last Supper, still fared much better, but the Battle of Anghiari, which he was supposed to paint in
The Battle of Anghiari?
yes,
Okay.
that was for the Palazzo, Florentine Palazzo for the authorities. And one wall was given to Leonardo da Vinci, the other wall to Michelangelo. And they started at the same time. Boy, he needed that because he looked up in one of the old Greek books technique, which was an oil paint. It suited his slowness better, and after the painting was done, you were supposed to carry huge bowls of boiling oil and put it underneath. And that was supposed to make the painting more permanent. First and above all, he only finished the small section, brought in the boiling oil, and the whole painting just went out. Yeah.
It just vanished.
Yeah, just vanished. He was incapable of getting himself to paint fast. Now, to paint the Shroud of Turin, even if it could be a painting, and I guarantee it couldn't be, it takes an artist who can paint what we call alla prima, not in coats, one coat.
One coat.
And you have to start on top and finish it on the bottom without lifting your finger.
Wow.
How could Leonardo da Vinci
Wow,
do
that's
that?
astonishing.
How could, and it shows no layers. His painting technique was layered, layer after layer. The Mona Lisa must have 1,000 layers, one after the
So you're saying Leonardo's technique was to have multiple layers.
Multiple
and
layers,
what we see on the
yes.
shroud is a single, well, it's not
Yes.
really a layer, it's just you have each of these, when you get down to the microscope, you see that each fiber of
Yes.
the linen is colored.
Yes,
And
yes.
and so we're still trying to figure out how that worked. But whatever it is, if that's a layer, then there's only one layer.
One,
And
yes.
and so the now so really everything we know about the shroud is really contrary to Leonardo's style.
Absolutely contrary. Another thing which is absolutely contrary, that he had this notebooks, a whole series of them, which he wrote from right to left, so that you could read it only with holding a mirror to it,
Okay.
so that nobody could read what he wrote. But everything was entered into it. He bought some laces for his pupil, Salaino. It's very neatly written. I bought today shoelaces for Salaino, 1 lira or something, whatever was the money at the time. So that he paints a painting like the shroud, and he doesn't enter one single word in his little diary.
So in all of his very detailed documentation that
Yeah.
he kept of everything else that he did,
never-
there's
yeah.
no mention of him
No
ever
mention,
doing anything
no
like
mention.
like the
Then
shroud.
all his creations, now he was a great scientist, there is no question about it, but all what he created, the airplane, all kinds of optical instruments, all kinds of war instruments, huge war instruments, none of them worked.
So none of them
one.
worked.
Yeah.
So he just had
So
ideas, but those are ideas that weren't really totally
Yes.
fleshed out. They were
So he was this greatest of all artists, because he was the greatest failure mankind ever knew. He never finished anything. Maybe the Mona Lisa is the only thing which he sort of finished, and it's everything.
Well, did he finish The Last Supper?
It's an arguable point. I really don't think so, because he already started to see the disintegration, the paint flaking off and things like that.
Right.
And he
So
was
others
so,
have had to come in and actually
well,
restore
maybe
it.
nobody would dare to touch it. It was left as he left it, but now that it underwent a thorough restoration, they found out that there were a whole bunch of plates and goblets and this and that, which he painted and then painted over. He was so hesitant. There is one of the apostles even had an extra hand because he abandoned the figure and then returned to it and everything.
And which is what you were saying, is that to be a successful mural painter, you have to be decisive. You can't you can't keep changing your mind and coming back and, well, I don't like that. I mean, you have to know what you're doing and be decisive about it.
No, he loved to abandon things. And none of the things which he created really worked. He was such a genius that he foretold to us that there will be a submarine. He foretold to us all kinds of cannons, very modern cannons, the flying machine, everything. But he himself could not do it. He just gave an idea. And
so he was a visionary, but he wasn't very good in actually executing it.
No.
Okay.
And of course later scientists returned to his work and studied it, and they lived out of him for centuries. They were able to execute what he just dreamt about.
Okay. Now, you've showed in some of your papers, and I don't know if it's this one or which one it is, but every artist uses a model to paint on. And so it goes back to this foreshortening thing that we talked about before the break, and the perspective that an artist would have to have in order to paint the man that we see pictured on the shroud. And in order to paint that perspective that we see, in the artist, you would have to be standing about how many feet above?
About 15 to 17 feet.
So in order to get that perspective of the man lying on the shroud, you'd have to be up on a ladder about 15 to 17 feet above to get the perspective that we see on the shroud, with the shoulders drawn up and the legs drawn up, and the fact that there doesn't appear to be any light focus in it at all, and so there, so the question is then how does one paint from 15 feet away? Or
a canvas which is 14 feet wide. It's impossible. People just don't picture the actual movements of the artist. He cannot. He only can make a small, very small painting, very small. And if you try to magnify it, as sometimes you do a small sketch and then you magnify it to actual size, it loses the detail. You don't see anymore what you see on the shroud. So it's impossible. You cannot stretch your arms.
That's right. I remember you telling about this, that as you go closer to the image, like a typical painting, you lose detail. But with the shroud, you gain detail in terms of getting down into the pixels and seeing how it's created in the blood stains, and so it really doesn't act like a painting. I mean,
that I have to correct.
Okay.
So many of my shroud colleagues get used to it. Maybe a scientist started to say that because you have to back off and see the shroud from 15, 20 feet in order to really see it, that it's not like a painting. This is not a good argument, because every painting you paint like that. The artist is like a runner. There is the canvas, what you see from close, it doesn't make any sense. you have to run backhand for backhand for backhand.
I see what you're saying.
Until, yes.
So the fact that it doesn't look like much close up does,
Yeah,
you know,
is not
that's
a
not
good
really an argument that you would
Yeah,
use
no,
from the standpoint
no,
of art,
no.
because any large artwork up close isn't going to look like anything. You have to
exactly.
stand back to really
Yes,
appreciate the overall
Yes,
artistic
yes.
piece. So
but
I see what you're saying.
precisely for the same reason, how can somebody standing 15 feet or 20 feet up in the air, you cannot even step out with your foot. I noticed that I had to put one foot over the other because my own foot would cover the model underneath.
To get that
Yes.
identical perspective that we see
Perspective,
on the
yes,
shroud.
yes.
And then what makes things even doubly harder is the dorsal image, because
Yes.
because here even there we see that the dorsal image is somewhat longer than the frontal image, because now you have because the body's drawn up, and so as you were saying, in order to capture from an artistic standpoint, to capture the dorsal side. Now, this alleged model, whoever this person was who volunteered for this, then had to be kind of, turn himself over in the exact same position he was when he was lying down on his back, and now his weight is going to be where on his like his nose.
No man could do that.
You wouldn't. It's not like you just kind of lay down flat, because what we see is the dorsal image has the same foreshortening characteristics as the frontal image, and so it would be virtually impossible for that to occur.
Completely impossible, because he would have to balance himself on the tip of his nose, on the top of one hand only, and one knee. That's all.
Now, there are those that would say, there are all kinds of. Again, we get into these theories of, well, maybe it was a hot statue and some kind of a dust rubbing. What would you say about that?
Oh, who in the Middle Ages could make a statue that realistic? There is no way. Plus, no matter how good the statue is, you still see that it's a statue. It's not a living person. And to heat a huge piece of bronze or whatever material, no way. You can't heat it like that. It would have to be so even that only the most modern, maybe electric system or something could do it.
Because what we see here is that the intensity of the image is identical from top to bottom, front to back. There's no difference in the intensity of the image, which suggests what you just said, is that you'd almost need some kind of a piece of technology in order to have a consistent heat. If in fact, infrared thermography would tell you that this image is not the result of heat, because the image does not fluoresce the way that the burns from the fire in 1532, those burns fluoresce, but the image does not. So if heat was involved in the formation of the image, there wasn't a lot of heat, but that heat had to be applied perfectly consistently over the entire bronze sculpture. And of course, another problem. So that's a problem. But then the second problem is finding an artist who predated Leonardo by 100 years, who had the ability to create such a lifelike. And we don't get into lifelike images like that until the Renaissance. And so here again, we come up with that event horizon thing. This kind of cultural historical barrier that you cannot assume that someone in the 1300s knew of a technology that would occur 200, 300, 500 years later. You just can't do it. And it's so whatever theory we come up with has to fit within the cultural context of that artist.
Yes. Plus, there is another third thing, that if you make a statue, even a heated statue, and you put a canvas on it and kind of go into all the cavities and the raised parts and everything, and then you pull off the canvas, it's a wide, stretched image, very ugly and completely out of anatomy.
Right, and
so there's a
so if you were
horizontal
to,
expansion.
so one of the, if you were to take a cloth and just wrap it around a face and then stretch it like this, it would be all real rounded. It would be
and
it
that
would
huge
be out of
horizontal
proportion.
expansion.
So which gets us, which is kind of an interesting clue then. So now we're back to Isabel saying, okay, this is not the work of an artist, so what is it? And so, so naturally we're back to, is it possible that this is the burial shroud that wrapped the historical Jesus of Nazareth when he was in the tomb? I mean, that's the debate. If this was the shroud of Julius Caesar, we wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now. And so it's the fact that the shroud appears to have three-dimensionality to it, or distance information, okay, yet at the same time, we know that just taking a cloth and wrapping it around a face would create a distortion. So, which then tells you that now this, on other places, on some of the writings that I've done, you'll know that I call the shroud the X-Files of Christianity, which is, because there is some really strange things about this image.
That's right.
And one of this is that the image formation mechanism appears to be a vertical phenomenon perpendicular to the cloth. So it doesn't. Is that right?
Yes, no, the most modern investigation I'm conducting tells us an even more complicated image. It's not even just up and down, because the parts which are concave and turn away from the perpendicular still register, and the system of that is maddeningly complicated.
So like the side of the nose or something.
The shroud is so much more complicated than any one of us, and even put together, realize. And it's, in my opinion, as a scientist, not just as an artist, as a scientist, I must say that no human being has that much brain to bring it forth. It's a divinely made item, and he really put us to the test, to such a test that I admire what nerve God had to expect us miserable little beings to understand what he did. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, what you'll see as a consistent theme in Shroud University is that the shroud is a fabulous mystery, and it could very well be the most important archaeological artifact on the planet. And the significance of the shroud is related to its potential. Because if the shroud is, in fact, the burial shroud of Jesus, and that image that's on there is the result of the resurrection, and the bloodstains is the result of crucifixion, I think you'd have to agree with me that that is enormous. And so the potential of the shroud is incredible, which is why people like myself and Isabel and other researchers continue to investigate it, because it's too important to just flippantly say, oh, well, it's medieval fake. We know that. It was carbon dated to the Middle Ages. Well, not so fast. And some of you might remember the news commentator Paul Harvey, and I always like to say, well, today I'm Paul Harvey, and you're going to hear the rest of the story. And that's what we're trying to tell on Shroud University, is that there's a lot to this story beyond just the simple soundbite from the evening news or an occasional documentary that you see that just hits the high points. There's a lot here. And so if you're a student and you're watching this, I encourage you to investigate the shroud. Find a way to incorporate the shroud into maybe you have to do a paper, a project, a presentation, a speech, something related to history, art, chemistry. Find a way to incorporate the shroud into it. I think it'll give you a reason to investigate it, and you'll find it fascinating. And so, Isabel, it has been wonderful to visit with you here in your studio. And is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience before we leave?
Yes, very much so. I think that Russ Braut did a magnificent job explaining this shroud to people. He's unique in this, that he speaks to the young especially, and we need young people to come to this research. God bless him for doing it and doing such a great job.
Thank you, Isabel. I appreciate that. So, okay. Well, listen, stay tuned for the next video blog, and this is also, the audio of this is going to be on the Shoutcast, which is a podcast that we do, and you can find it on iTunes. Just look for Shoutcast, and you can download it and listen to this. So, until next time, Russ Briault from Shroud University.